Welcome to Eating Enlightenment, the show that explores individual transformation stories around food, eating, body, mind, and healing. In particular, giving exploration towards the cognitive, the thoughts, the mental paradigms, the ability to reconnect with your body, the tools and strategies that work, and just having some fun along the way. I'm Jared, and long story short, I struggled with food. I was a wrestler. I became freaking miserable. I became a monk because I was so miserable. And up in the mountains, got some meditation goodness. And now I'm all about spreading the mindful vibe. And my role in this podcast is to simply explore, ask great questions, and stay in the present moment with my guest. Our guest today is Haley from RDRRX Nutrition, and we really just talk about how to begin intuitive eating, both from Haley's own career, but also if you are a really hardworking person who is a go-getter, and how to begin the intuitive eating journey, along with some interesting perspectives on CrossFit. I know exercise oftentimes gets, we'll say, demonized. If you're in the anti-diet, if you're in recovery, oftentimes people over-exercise, right? So then exercise becomes sort of even a problem, because too much exercise obviously is something that can really harm people. And oftentimes, from my own experience as well with wrestling and just athletics, too much exercise can really be harmful. And so it's really interesting to hear Haley's perspective on CrossFit, which is a great example of how you can exercise appropriately, even doing like an intense thing like CrossFit. I know other times, other guests have said maybe CrossFit or gymnastics or whatever, different exercises they've had to, it was too extreme for them. And Haley shows that it's totally possible to do something like CrossFit, that it truly is not one size fits all, and that we really have to make room for nuance, to make room for exceptions, to realize that every body is different, every CrossFit gym is different in this scenario. And so I really appreciate Haley for her insights on beginning intuitive eating journey, sharing tips and stories about exercise appropriately in a wise way. And I know you're going to get a lot out of this episode. Without further ado, let's dive in. Why are you so passionate about health and wellness and CrossFit and not restricting and moving and dietetics and diabetes? You're passionate about so many different things, Haley. I love it. And you've got so many different activities and hobbies. I'm sure you can share later on. You've got a great website that shares a lot about your personal life and everything. Anyways, that's a long introduction. What are you passionate about?
So I have probably a long-winded answer to that, but I'll try and keep it concise. I am very much a Enneagram 3, if anybody is familiar with that. So achieving was one of my, that's one of my drivers. But when I started as a dietitian, I worked in the inpatient setting and realized, oh, this is a little bit different than what I expected. I'm not, building relationships necessarily. I'm just kind of either writing tube feeds or TPNs, or giving a really quick education where I didn't see them for a follow-up, and I have no idea, how much they really got out of that. So anyways, I still love aspects of inpatient nutrition. But when I moved to Colorado, I was presented with some outpatient opportunities, and that's really where some of the diabetes parts came in, where I realized a lot of these patients do have that. So I needed to be a little bit more versed with their medications and just management strategies that I didn't necessarily learn in my dietetics program. So that's kind of why I have that credential. It was more out of a way to better serve my patients versus what like my passion is about. After being in the outpatient setting a while, I really loved, building those relationships, connecting with people. But there's still some things with healthcare that I don't necessarily agree with or love. Sometimes it was way too focused around weight loss, or maybe I wasn't able to have the availability to truly follow up with these patients as much as I would have liked to. There's just still some flaws, I think, in our healthcare system. So then I was inspired to open my own practice, which I opened an office in the CrossFit gym that I was coaching at. I love exercise. As a gymnast till I was 18. I ran D1 track. Like I've always just been very active. That's just something I love to do. So when I opened my office in the CrossFit gym, I realized my clientele was very different than my
Uh,
hospital experience and outpatient counseling experience. These are people that are athletes, they are driven, they want results. And so I kind of took on a little bit of like macro coaching and just looking at more of their nutrition piece versus also what was going on mentally. And what I learned was there were a lot of unhealthy relationships with food, a lot of very controlling, restrictive ideals about what their nutrition had to look like to be a successful athlete. And that's kind of where I knew I needed to, again, achieve another credential because needed to serve them better and look at their nutrition a little bit more as a whole versus just the numbers, just the science. So once I became immersed in intuitive eating, my whole practice has changed, my whole life has changed, and that's kind of what led me to be excited and pursuing more of intuitive eating counseling.
I was definitely interested in the CrossFit aspect because uh, for listeners, the one of the episodes that will be released next was with a woman who kind of was in an unhealthy relationship with CrossFit, over exercising, and I sometimes hear that CrossFit can be an over exercising experience. I've never actually done CrossFit, but I've definitely over exercised and wrestling and just wearing myself out. That with that being said, I don't think that you by doing CrossFit you're like forced into over exercising. I don't think that like all people fall into that trap. Um, do you think do you hear that CrossFit is associated with like over exercising and that type of thing?
So, my experience, I've worked at two really amazing, very family oriented, friendly competition gyms where it's not as like serious. I mean, I'm not saying that some of the people aren't very serious about their athletic ability, but it's 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 a much different environment. I think that's a really hard question to answer because I've even traveled in different gyms with totally different vibes and ways of coaching and that competition factor. I think CrossFit does bring in a lot of personalities of people who maybe take things to extremes. And that's where I think that's an open field for, well, I need to be doing the most I can to beat this person, or just getting a little too competitive where it's not always a healthy situation.
But your experience has not been that way. It's been friendly competition and um what is friendly competition? That seems like can you give an example of one friendly competition CrossFit that you were
Yeah.
engaged in?
So it took me a little while to realize like we all have our different strengths, and just because the girl next to me is lifting a lot more than me, that doesn't mean I need to do that. So it can be very humbling. It took me a little while to acknowledge that being an athlete growing up. I was like, well, I should be able to do that if she is. So um but I think it's just done in such a different way. Like I've been to gyms where you have to put your score on the board for everyone to see, or just different ways of encouraging progress. I think can be very a game changer. So, like for example, my gym has an app that you can put in how you did for your workout to go back and look how you did earlier in the year. But it also does show you everyone else's. But you have the choice. You don't always have to put it in there. You can log in your own journal if that's important to you, and just going from there. So, yeah.
So by the way, if you heard that ding sound, there are just long story short some technical difficulties and hopefully it won't happen much this interview, but we may have a few more dings. So we've tried our best and we are settling with imperfection. So yes, just a heads up, and I will try to cut those out. But
anyways, you mentioned something that I think is really interesting, that you didn't it sounds like you did not really get caught up in CrossFit over exercising, etc. Um, and this is despite being an Enneagram 3, like the achiever side. Um, I just think it would be likely, especially I've coming from a background where wrestling,
Mhm.
where there's a lot of emphasis on weight and shape and et cetera, and gymnastics too. I hear your background in gymnastics, and so in the back of my head, I'm like, she's the prime, the prime, vulnerability. She's an achiever. She has a background in gymnastics. Like she's getting into CrossFit, which I've heard stories of. Um, what were the like biggest factors do you think that like insulated you, protected you from falling into the trap of over exercising?
That's a really good question, and fortunately, I just was always put into environments that were very, in my opinion, healthy. Like, I never had a gymnastics coach that would make comments about my body, which is maybe unheard of for a lot of people. I mean, sometimes people had McDonald's for snack and nobody thought twice about it, and we were a competitive gym and we, traveled and lots of good things, but I just have been blessed with really good coaches and my parents. My parents were definitely uh, encouraging high achievement, but it was never in comparison to anyone else. It was my own skill level. So I'm not sure what necessarily protected me from a lot of the getting too caught up in a comparison game or feeling the need to overdo it. I think just my personal self, I've been a little bit more intuitive, at least with my physical body, when I know something's too much. Even running track, I would never go to the extent of like having to throw up after a race or something like that, where I saw teammates who did that. And I'm like, I don't even think I could push myself like that. That's not normal. That you don't have to go to those lengths to be good at something
Mm,
or
mm.
to improve. So I don't know that answer, to be honest.
No, I think you listed some great reasons. I mean, even parents who encouraged you, but not in a self comparison way. It seems like they were encouraging you to compare yourself against yourself, right? To do a little bit better than you did the
Yeah,
previous day,
yeah.
so forth, and great coaches. I
It
think
was
those are excellent reasons. And I'm betting too that your parents and coaches, you seem from your website, from the comments you mentioned earlier, building relationships. You mentioned that when you were an inpatient, this was like something that you felt constrained by the inpatient setting. And when you went to outpatient, you had more of a chance. Before we explore relationships for the listener, can you just describe like what is the difference between inpatient and outpatient? And I'm at an eating disorder center, which is inpatient right now. So, but I've never done the outpatient side. So I'm kind of curious on your take on that as well.
Yeah, inpatient, most of the patients are there for an acute illness or something where they need to be hospitalized. So they're never feeling good. They're worried about finances or what's going to happen next or diagnosis or whatever. So it's really not a good environment to be providing education. When I would get a red flag that somebody's BMI is high, like going to provide unwanted healthy diet education in that environment is not always helpful. Of course, I would always ask, like, we're a resource here. Would you like this education? If not, like, please know that we have outpatient counseling if that's something. Anyways, it's just not a great environment for that. Outpatient is where somebody comes in who's not critically ill and can book their appointment anytime. And it's a much better environment because they're there because they either referred or want to be there, and it's a better outcome. And yeah,
Yeah, no, I definitely hear you. I mean, I get so many clients at the inpatient center. The insurance is just it's a horrible weight on their shoulders. It's like a school teacher, like a nasty school teacher breathing down their throat, the back of their neck. They're always like, "Am I going to be kicked out?" And I appreciate your comments. I do, because I see that sometimes people aren't sure why they're there. Not all the time. People oftentimes are fully bought in, but sometimes people aren't sure why they're there. Yeah, it does make it really difficult to change and learn new things when you're kind of in a state of fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why in the like my private practice or outpatient setting, people are coming to me because they're ready to change, or they're at least ready for trying something different, or they've exhausted all of their dieting culture habits or whatever. So it's a lot more rewarding and successful when
What's your favorite modality? You have to pick one. You have diabetes, you have nutrition, you have wellness, you have yoga. You can only pick one to specialize in for the rest of your life. What do you pick?
that's hard. And there's so many different things because my body doesn't always need high intensity. Sometimes I need yoga. Or, sometimes people are just ready to learn a little bit about their new diagnosis of diabetes. And that's always really fun for me because it's a really cool way to share that there's a lot of hope and ways to manage it. And it's not this like horrible end all be all. But the intuitive eating thing is definitely where my heart's at.
Hmm.
And like, I don't live my life counting every little calorie or macro. And people, I think once they see that life or nutrition or a healthy diet doesn't have to look like that, like that's such like a cool thing to see people being up to be.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. It sounded like on your journey to where you got to today, it sounded like the intuitive eating w- was kind of the last piece, and it really either
Yeah.
shifted things or was different than your education before, and you really loved that piece. Am I understanding that correct?
Yeah. I after graduating, like I am not a fluffy person. I'm not a feelings. Maybe I say that and I actually am. I don't know. But with kind of these more like asking, how did you feel after this meal, or what made you choose that, or like there's so much more to nutrition than just the science that I had to accept that my clients are not robots, and a lot of them came to me asking for very specific numbers. What should my calories be? And I'm like, well, that's not authentic to like how I eat or how I think nutrition should be. And so it took me a while to recognize like intuitive eating is much more authentic to how I want to teach people and encourage a healthier, just less.
When you say it took a while, can you help me understand your process of integrating intuitive eating? Like you read the book, or how did you actually like integrate intuitive eating, and like what was that like?
Reading the book was step one, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like this is written by dietitians. Like, what? How have I missed this? Why was this not a curriculum or like a course in my 6 years of education?" And I like immediately after that, I was like, "I need to know more. I need to know how to help my clients, live this life because the tools that I have now, or just the science approach is not it's not that it doesn't necessarily work for a lot of people, but it does it work long term? Does it feel good? Is it what I want to be associated with? I don't think that, or that just was not true to what I wanted to do. So yeah.
If you had to summarize like what traditional nutrition education is missing, what would you summarize that as?
Definitely more of the counseling styles. You can just cut that out. So what I think is missing in our curriculum is more of these things, and how to deal with traumas of dieting, how to really identify when somebody has a healthy or unhealthy relationship with food. Like I did not feel well equipped for that graduating. So I would say
Yeah.
more of the mental side of things.
Would you say that was like I could imagine it being difficult to if you didn't receive proper training in dealing with like unhealthy relationships with food, and you jump in the waters of starting your practice and everything, and you inevitably run across people who really are struggling with food. Um, I imagine that would be a struggle itself. I use the word struggle like just 10 times right there, but I imagine like what was the most difficult part about um, we'll say starting your own practice with perhaps like not the right tools?
Sure. I think it was a lot of self-reflection, like, are these people coming to me really in a healthy enough place to be focusing solely on nutrition? And if not, then I mean, it is uncomfortable to ask, do you have a therapist? Have you had a history of eating disorder? I have that on my assessment form when new clients sign up. And I will tell you, most of them like to leave that little piece out until they build better rapport with me. So things like that, where it was like, okay, I didn't even realize a lot of these things that have come along from dieting because I haven't experienced that personally. I didn't have tools to help people overcome that or have a better relationship with food without just focusing on maybe more of the science piece. I didn't have the counseling approaches that I do now that have been kind of a game changer.
Yeah, I definitely can recall not knowing. I mean, it's funny because I had some eating struggles myself, but I don't know. It was like I didn't think other people did for some reason. Like even getting into personal training was sort of like oh everyone's good with food, even and then getting deeper into it, it was like oh people have really messed up relationships with food, and I think maybe we have this script, a cultural script, we'll say, that food is easy or everyone's good with food or everyone's in control. And it's like a very surface layer thing. I don't know. It's not something you really talk about, like food struggles. So I don't think I really saw much of it until I kind of opened my eyes to it or got exposed to it. But
Well,
I
in my
definitely realized that it can learning more and more about people's unhealthy relationships with food can be a exploration.
And I don't know why in my brain I thought everybody's motivator would be to improve their health and how they feel. And that is certainly not everybody's motivator. Sometimes it's like, I want to look like that girl, or I want to be my weight that I was in high school, or things that I'm like, wait, what? You have to make such extreme changes to be at that. Like, what? Why is this your motivator? Or do you even know why? And there's so many things in there that I was just like, oh, okay, well, I need to be able to address this, but you know, be in a place where I have to meet them where they're at, but also help them, guide them to a better, you know, better outcome and sustainable things, sustainable habits that they're changing.
Yeah, it sounds like the counseling dynamic. Did the counseling dynamic sort of come to you after the nutrition school or dietetic school? Did that kind of evolve over time, or how did you start to integrate counseling and these different learning about these different motivations that go deeper than nutrition? How did that evolve over time?
I think just recognizing, when I would ask people or start asking a little bit more of what are you motivated by? Like what are going to push for these changes so that you actually feel better. And for example, I had somebody today who was like, you know what, I can get through some headaches if that's what it takes, or what. And I'm like, are you listening to what you are saying? You're willing to feel crummy to look a certain way. And I think it's just helping people recognize like,
Mm.
okay, that no longer is a health focus and it's something much deeper than that, or kind of an unrealistic expectation that isn't going to be healthy down the road.
Yeah, definitely. What do you what other is there any particular story that stands out where someone was like had just an extreme goal that sounded true to them? They're like, "Hey, I want to be 50 pounds," and you're like, "50 pounds? Like what?" Like it sounded crazy, but to them it sounded um like normal. And it's okay if you don't have any stories off the top of your head, but I do know what you're saying, where it's like y- you're this sounds normal to you, but this is not normal.
Sure. One thing that I did have happen to me is I had a client who was just literally eating a scoop of protein powder. He wasn't mixing it with anything, nothing, because he was fearful of what he ate because he just didn't understand what it should look like, or thought that that would be, what he needed to sustain his muscle mass. And
Mm.
that, like, oh my gosh, like you live in a world where you can't even eat food without being fearful of how it will change your body or whatever, when it's a very basic human need, and it's just like presenting that in a way that it's like, we have to get back to kind of reality and um, fill that education gap so that you can feel a little bit more comfortable with eating real food, you know? So, I mean, that was probably one of the biggest uh,
Yeah.
recognition. I'm like, oh my gosh, people just really, are in this place of trying to be perfect with their diet and so fearful of just anything going into their body that it can come down to just eating protein powder. So, you know,
Yeah. Do you think there are personality types that are more susceptible, we'll say,
oh,
to
yeah.
like what you can even use the enneagrams if you want, but like what personality types do you feel, or patterns that you see, or like what types of people are maybe more, susceptible to becoming, I'm not even sure how to finish that sentence, becoming really afraid of food, developing unhealthy relationships with food, um, becoming overly concerned about weight and stuff. What kind of personality characteristics do you see?
I would say my population of clients is more of like very high achieving females who either own their own business or very, top of their game as far as career goals go. And they want to know how to do it all. They want to work a million hours a week. They want to make sure they're exercising every day. They want to make sure their diet is perfect, strict, balanced every meal. Like,
Healthy, clean, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
so I don't know if that's necessarily a type of person. That's just kind of the demographic that I see pretty frequently.
Hmm.
And it's kind of just looking at like, well, what is sacrificed in your life to maintain these things? Are you less present for your family? Are you able to eat a meal with someone else without having to bring your own food, or the whole dinner you're just thinking about, is this balanced? Can I have this pasta or whatever, where it takes away from that experience? And so, yeah, I would say kind of the very high achieving male and female, or people who just, really have had things happen in the past, whether it's family members or relatives with chronic illness, and they're trying to avoid that. Um, yeah, I would
I
say.
think I think it's pretty common, for the people who actually are willing to, work on themselves. I feel like those are the types of people that we'll see, because I tend to get high achievers as well. We'll say highly organized, very competent people. Um, they're pretty damn good at their job. They might be a little bit. I think one characteristic I see a lot is people pleasing. Of course, like they're burning themselves out there for everyone else, but not enough time for them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I wonder too. I mean, denial can be such a powerful force. There's got to be people who are in denial, and I don't know. For people who are in denial, I guess I just don't see them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. But I wondered about so I know a little bit about the Enneagram, not much, but because I think I was a 3 as well, and I'm forgetting my secondary. There's a secondary, right?
Yeah, there's like a wing on each side. So Enneagram 3 achiever with a wing of like kind of a people pleaser or a helper, which
Is
is, I
that like which number is that? There's 9.
think it's a 2.
Okay,
So any wing you have is on the, it's either, so if I'm a 3, it would either be a 2 or a 4.
oh,
Uh,
interesting.
yeah.
I
So
thought mine I thought mine was like a 7 or something.
you could definitely,
I forget though. Like I'm not quite sure, but that would be obviously not a wing. That would be a, I don't know.
another one that you're close to, or I don't know. I tried to pick it like 4 different times because I didn't want to be that person.
Ah, I see, I see.
So I was like, no, this has to be right. Let me try it again. Was finishing my yoga teacher training, that was brought up a lot. It's like, I don't want to base my life value on achievements anymore. I want to step away from that and have a better life that's not so driven by achievement.
Interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating that you're stepping away. I feel like for me, I try to lean into the edge of achievement and like, sort of embrace the strengths of productivity, but also, you know, uh, not taking it to an extreme degree, which I think it's easy to do in America. Just work, 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 work. No pain, no gain. Mind
Exactly.
over matter. So there's definitely like yeah, maybe a skillful way
Mhm.
do achievement. I think. Speaking of which, how do you be a skillful achiever? How do you? I mean, you're crushing it, right? It's funny that it's no wonder you attract high performing women. You got your own gym and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even though you might be stepping away from achievement, I'll put you in the category of an achiever if that's okay with you. And then
Yeah.
I'd love to get your opinion on how to be skillful about achieving things.
Well, that's
Or feel free to put yourself in a different label or whatever, but you know what I'm saying.
it worked really well for me when I was younger. I could go to high school and then I'd have 3 practices after high school. I was fine. Like I had the energy.
Three practices?
Yeah, my parents had
What?
agreed
Oh.
then like, but I thrived. Like I loved
Okay,
that,
okay,
like
okay.
being busy. Like I don't even know how to turn on my own TV. Like, I just don't. That's not that's not something for me. But
You don't
um,
know how to turn on your TV?
no, yeah, that. So I mean, activity and that stuff, like, I don't know if it was just the achievement or if it's just pure enjoyment. But,
Mhm.
um, and then, for example, I worked 7 days a week for a few years because I wanted to pay off my student loans, and that was an achievement I needed to accomplish. And I've just done that for a long time. And now I'm starting to realize, okay, well, what is being sacrificed in my adult life that isn't, necessary anymore? Like, I'm not very present in the evening because I'm glued to my computer, or my girlfriends are going out to do something fun, and I'm like, shoot, I have you know this on my list that I can't be a part of that. So I think my personal relationships,
Mm.
um, when I started to see those suffer a little bit, that's where achievement didn't mean anything to me anymore. It's like, no, I need, well, it still does, but you know what I mean? It's that reality check of, you only have so much time on this earth. And if it's just um,
Work.
to, yeah. And I love my clients and I love serving them and I love being available like 24/7 and being there for them. It's just, I can still do that. It just may need to look a little bit different. Or, I didn't go to school for business. I'm not a business owner. I'm a dietitian. So I didn't realize like setting boundaries was a thing I had to do, or
Mm.
doing my own scheduling. I needed to be better about blocking out things when they tried to reschedule when I had made plans with friends or whatever. So just little things like that is kind of the
I
big
think
game.
that's really important as well, to balance play and leisure with work. I think for me that's been a learning to rediscover. Like I think for me one of my struggles has been, well, just like historically speaking, it's been to connect with my body, to feel my body. I've been kind of grew up in a thinking world where education was prioritized above everything else, and the felt body was missing. And so when you don't have for me, when you aren't really feeling your body, it's hard to know what you like. And it's just easy to work, work, work. And so for me, it's been a ongoing journey has been rediscovering, hey, I like hiking. Hiking just feels good. I like playing poker with my friends. I like board games and figuring out what I like. I definitely relate to that. I think that's the skillful way of balancing out achievement of the yin
Yeah,
and the yang, right?
it's funny that you say that because actually what inspired my whole private practice transition was my dentist, like in your mouth asking questions like that. But he asked me in the beginning, he was like, well, what do you do for fun? And I'm just like hanging out there with my mouth open. I can't say anything. Like, what do you mean for fun? Like, I'm an adult. I just go to work and that's it. I mean, I go to
Yeah,
practice, whatever, but I couldn't think of like, what am I doing for fun anymore? And I
yeah, yeah.
a lot of that. So, yeah, I think that's another thing that's like, yeah, if you are so hyper focused on whatever it is, maybe it is your nutrition, or your exercise or whatever, work was mine. But it's like, oh, when life becomes not fun well, as fun as it could be anymore, it's like, hmm, okay.
This is just coming to me now. I wonder if this like shift, away from balancing work and life. I wonder if that mirrored your intuitive eating shift. I wonder like what came first.
Yeah. I don't know, but I the yoga teacher training that I just did, a
Mhm.
lot of my friends were like, "No way. Like, that is a joke. Like, you
Oh,
can't."
the yoga. Like I see.
They were just like, what are all these feelings and intuitive stuff you're doing? Like that does not seem like.
Interesting.
And so I'm like, guys, I'm a lot more intuitive than people think. Like and when it comes through nutrition, like that was very easy for me to grasp onto. Maybe not all other aspects of my life, but the nutrition piece of it was like, oh my gosh, yes. And then the
The,
yoga part was very it's taking me a while to learn.
like the nutrition, the traditional education you got, the structure was that you, yeah, I got you. And then the yoga. Sometimes I feel that yoga can be too rigid.
Sure.
But the way you're describing it, it seems to be the opposite, which I appreciate. I remember going to a studio. Um, what's the style of yoga? It wasn't for me. It was the
Is it
same.
the
It wasn't. I am thinking of Bikram, of course, but it's not. It was a different one. But Bikram, we'll just use Bikram as an example. Same 26 poses,
yes.
very hot, very rigid.
And
Um,
militant almost. Like you have to do them perfectly. And
yeah.
I did not like
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's sort of the like Western ethos, the like the mindset of like Western folks, I'll say. Like really intense, really like I don't know, and that seeps in, and yoga it seeps in, and nutrition it seeps in, and everywhere.
yeah. And I like that is not how my training was. Like what I really value from mine was more of like you have to meet people where they're at. They need to be listening to their body. If a pose doesn't serve them, they need to do something else. And that's just how CrossFit is too. Like
Hmm.
when I have athletes who are maybe at a different level, like I need to make sure they feel very confident and comfortable to modify and scale and not compare themselves to anyone else in the room because that really takes away from them progressing in a good, strong, healthy way. If it's just jumping to something or feeling pressured to do something just because everyone else is, I think that can be a really not good place to be.
Yeah. Um, I feel it. I definitely feel it. Um, and so your yoga training was like it was well, it was the opposite of that. It sounds like. What style was it in? Was it just your standard vinyasa flow, or
Yeah, I mean, we went
gotcha?
through everything, but it was also the teacher was just very adamant about this needs to be inclusive to anyone and everyone. That's what yoga is. It shouldn't
Hmm.
be, making people feel like they can't do it or um, you know, it needs to be about where the person's at and
I love that emphasis.
so, yeah.
Was that like what do you think the most mm, we'll say surprising thing about your yoga training? Like the thing you didn't expect
Yeah.
going into it.
Just that. I
That
was
yeah,
like,
that yeah.
I, I questioned like, am I good enough to be here? Like,
Mm,
I'm not very flexible anymore because I haven't made this a priority in my life. Like, what are
hmm.
they gonna think? How am I gonna teach this if I'm not perfect? And that absolutely was not ever an issue. It's like, no, everybody, even if you are teaching a class and you can't do a pose that you're offering, showing the modification and letting them know it's okay if they can't either. And, things
Yeah,
like,
staying, I mean, yoga is so much about flexibility, and sometimes our mindsets are not flexible, right?
yeah,
It's like, I got to do it perfectly. And sounds like this is a pretty, I don't know, flexible approach you're
yeah,
taking and everything.
and plus,
Um, yeah, no, so as we kind of wrap up, I wanted to offer, uh, let's say uh, you're the person you tend to attract, the high performing uh, person who's a bit strict with themselves. They're working themselves uh, to death. We'll say we'll go to the extremes. Um, and you could if you could say something to them, what would you say?
one of the things I always ask again is what is sacrificing in your life to, have all this attention on detail to your food or whatever. But also like in 5 years, what does your life still look like and what do you think you're going to maybe miss out on? And it may not always be that perspective. Um, but with what you're doing right now, does this seem sustainable? Does this seem like a quality life that you want to, keep going at, or do you want to take some different approaches to see if, intuitive eating principles can be a little bit more freeing and provide you a better quality of life? And Yeah. So some of those like a little bit deeper questions that are I
Shifting
have.
your perspective from to like what's really important.
Exactly.
It's funny
Yeah.
how like the future does that, right?
Yeah.
I'm reminded of like the what's that, seven of principles of highly effective people. It's like the tombstone exercise, thinking about what people will say. That's like taking it really far in the future.
Yeah.
I love it. I appreciate it. I really do. So Haley, where can people find you online?
I have a website with very amateur recipes, but I create them in uh, consideration of my clients who don't have very much time. So if you see a direction that says throw everything in a crock pot, that's literally what I mean, and that's why. So I have that going on. I have a Pinterest that's pretty active because I like sharing these resources and making that more of a tool for my clients and just anyone who wants to use them. So you can find me there. I have Instagram, Facebook, and it's all under RDRX Nutrition. So
RDRX Nutrition.
yeah,
Registered dietitian. What's the RX?
prescribed. So I when I opened my business in the CrossFit gym, I was like, I'm just going to do Haley Hughes nutrition counseling. And they're like, you're not Jenny Craig. You're not famous. You do your name. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I'm
Gotta
not.
start somewhere.
Yeah, I was like so annoyed. So, anyways, RDRX came of that. And in CrossFit, workouts typically have a RX or prescribed like workout. So it's kind of a tie into that.
Cool.
It is what it is. It's
Cool. I think that speaks to your roots, and yeah, it is what it is. Whatever. It's cool. It's RDRX. It's easy. It's got a ring to it, I guess, or pretty easy to remember.
yeah.
Um, okay. Final question. Answer this however you like.
Okay.
But with Mr. Buddha behind me, I don't know if you can see, but anyways, enlightenment is a word that can mean many different things, from your body to feeling lighter to a opening of your mind, nirvana to I don't know. What
Yeah.
does enlightenment mean for you?
I think, I mean, just from this conversation with kind of what I have going on in my life right now, enlightenment is just a different, better way of living perspective of feeling more free and being able to enjoy the small things and, um, yeah, just a different way of looking at life and brighter, happier, good things.
Awesome. I love it. Thanks
Yeah,
so much, Haley, for coming on.
yeah, absolutely.
All right, namaste, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. It really does mean the world to me. And be sure to check out the Eating Enlightenment journaling app on iTunes and iOS. It's also available on my website at eatingenlightenment.com. But try it out. Download the app, start today, because it's pretty simple and quick to get the hang of this really simple guideline. Journal before you eat, journal with awareness before you eat, write out your thoughts and feelings in the app before you eat. Do that. You will see results right away. You will start rethinking and changing your eating decisions. You won't binge as much if you write stuff down. It's that simple. I want you to try it for yourself. I want you to go to the iOS store right now while it's fresh on your mind. While it's fresh on your mind, go to the iOS store right now, download the Eating Enlightenment app or Android, or go to eatingenlightenment.com. It's right on the front page. Download the app. Give it a shot before your next meal. You can start today. You can literally start writing your thoughts and feelings out on paper, getting those neural connections established from your feeling body to your mind. You can start building those neural pathways, which are going to help you change your eating habits in a really practical way. You'll see changes right away. You will realize that the unhealthy food right in front of you you don't even want it. You realize, why am I even going towards it? Why am I grabbing towards it? You'll put it away. You'll move on with your day. You'll be more present with others because you got those thoughts out of your head. Even if they're crazy thoughts, you got them out of your head onto paper, and now you can be more present with people because your mind is more free. oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm going on a ramble, but the point is, if you struggle with food, and let's be honest here, some of you listening do, that's okay. If you're a creative person, you like expressing yourself via the written word, right? This journaling thing isn't for everyone, but if you struggle with food and you're a creative person on one side, or you're highly organized, extremely hard worker and logical on the other side, the journal is meant for those folks, and those folks love the journal. Highly organized people are able to finally struggle to get their feelings out on paper, but writing is something that they can do. It's natural to them. And then the organized person who's maybe more chaotic is actually able to put structure to their thoughts and feelings around food. It's just a amazing practice that can honestly change your life. That will change your life. The more you commit to this, the more you understand this. So, you know what to do, and stay tuned for the next episode coming up.